Hello, I'm Adim, and I want you to take a short trip down the memory lane with me. Close your eyes and imagine this. The year is 2001. You just got a brand new PC running the glorious new Windows XP. You are playing some of the fresh games that came with the system. But at some point, you decide that you want to play one of your absolute childhood favorites. So, you pop out an old CD-ROM or slide in a floppy disk, ready to bathe in the pure nostalgia, and you get an error, and nothing happens. The game just refuses to launch, and your heart breaks just a little bit with it. This is because back in the 80s and the 90s, PC gaming was ruled by DOS. Disk operating system was a text-based command line beast with strict memory limits, where you had to wrestle with base memory, expanded memory, and sound card IRQs just to get the game to boot. Then, when Windows XP arrived, it was built on Windows NT kernel, meaning it completely ditched the underlying MS-DOS architecture, unlike Windows 95 and 98 before it. What that meant is no more direct hardware access to your vintage games. With that single drop, the entire era of gaming history was suddenly locked behind an invisible digital wall. But as you know, here at GOG, we specialize in crumbling the digital walls. In fact, situations like this is exactly why GOG was born, so that you're able to play your good old games on new modern machines, without the hassle. Enter Dosbox, the absolute revolution that saved DOS games from obscurity. We actually owe a massive debt of gratitude to its original creators, Cubix and Haraket. They saw the danger of losing these games back when Windows 2000 launched, and they began building an MS-DOS emulator that recreates the entire computer system. It pretends to be a complete vintage PC from the 90s, stored inside your modern rig. It emulates everything down to the silicon level. This is basically the heart of the Dosbox configuration. This is the main config file that I mentioned. So here you can go one by one with all the options that are available. The green stuff is the comments, so that you know which flag does what. So first we have all the rendering options, so you choose how you want the game to be displayed. You probably want the game to be run in full screen. If not, you just change it to false. Screen resolution, full screen resolution as desktop. If you do it yourself, I really recommend to always go with desktop stuff. Otherwise, if you, for instance, change it to original resolution, you will scramble your whole desktop icons and stuff like that, because your system will try to show the game in the native resolution. Probably it will fail because that's too small of a resolution for modern screens, but anyways. Yeah, so here's some stuff for the rendering. Then we have the stuff to set up what machine should be emulated. Usually SVGA S3 is the golden default, but you have all the options here. This also means this also tells the emulator whether it should emulate a specific graphic card from the era. So for example, CGA Mono, those are the CGA Mono is obviously black and white, but CGA is only four colors, I think. So yeah, this is basically for setting up the screens. So machine, mem size, how many megabytes of RAM should Dosbox have? How many megabytes of RAM? You don't want gigabytes, because obviously DOS never had gigabytes, so usually 16 megabytes is fine. Those are the settings you can read about if you want to change anything. Then there is a rendering. So this is actually pretty interesting, because this thing here, we usually set it to sharp because we want the game to look as crisp as possible. But might want to have this more like resembling the old VGA monitor or TV. So we can actually change this setting, GL shader, to like RCT Auto Machine or RCT Arcade Machine, whatever, and it will give you the scan lines for the more retro look. We are unsure if you guys actually want that, so we basically make it to look like crisp. But we'll go to that later because you can also check it in our new configuration tool. You could think of us like mechanics restoring a classic car. We don't just hand you a box of rusty parts to assemble yourself. We do the dirty work, so you can just turn the key and drive. When we prepare a DOS game, we first install it in a pure sandbox environment. We are mounting virtual drives, mapping ISO images for those classic multi-disk adventures, and fighting with DOS memory configurations just like we did in 1993. I'm talking about manually balancing the base 640 kilobytes memory, EMS, expanded memory, and XMS, extended memory. All this so that the game can actually breathe. We then assigned RQ, DMA channels, and input-output addresses by hand so that your emulated Sound Blaster syncs perfectly without crashing the system. Mixer, so here you change how the game sounds, and Dosbox staging has like built upon the old Dosbox with this setting especially. So they added stuff like being able to add some reverb or chorus. They also actually tell you what would be the best use scenario for those. So like for emulating a speaker that would just stand between your screens, a small speaker, you can add small reverb, chorus, depending on what games you are playing. So yeah, this is also a cool setting. We usually set this for you because it sounds better. MIDI usually is fine. This is also usually fine because here is like settings to emulate Roland MT32 sound card. You cannot legally do that without the drivers, so we cannot set it up for you. You need to obtain the drivers first. Sound Blaster, this is the thing that we can set up for you, and yeah, this is all the stuff that usually the game needs. And what would usually be the headache of the old era, because you basically need to set RQ, DMA, SD port exactly as you have set it up on your machine. And if you just, like for instance, put 5 instead of 7 here, and it would be actually set on 5 on your machine, or maybe I confused it. Well, basically the sound won't work, so this one's pretty important. Gravis Ultrasound, same stuff as with Roland MT. You need to legally own the files to be able to play back those in Dosbox, so we cannot really set it up for you. We are talking true OPL3 synthesizer emulation for that crispy Sound Blaster 16 or pure Adlib audio, and VESA local bus graphics for those high-res SVGA titles. In that second file, Autoexec section, we often code custom launch menus for you, so instead of typing mount commands, you get a beautiful set of options right away to launch expansions, run the original setup tools, or change language. You still get some of that classic DOS magic, but with absolutely zero command line headaches. It's actually 1,532 lines that you need to go one by one if you want to set up a particular game. But we actually changed this and improved upon it a bit. So we now have, for most games that we release in the GOG preservation program, we are adding this special configurator that if you run, it will give you some options basically taken from this, so that you can, without going into this huge file. You can just use the drop downs to set the resolution that you want the game to be run in window if you want it to run in window. The full screen resolution that I mentioned, aspect ratio if you want to, for whatever reason, stretch the game for the, you know, for your 16:9 monitor. Here you can actually also set the shaders that I mentioned for the more retro look. Here is the volume, so you can volume basically all the stuff that, you know, playing sounds needs. This is the reverb and chorus, so you can like set it. If it's not fine, then just exit the game, set it to something else, try again until you find your sweet spot. And then performance, if you want to set a particular number of CPU cycles. So yeah, this one is usually tailored game by game. Those are the settings for the Lost Eden only, my favorite game from the childhood, but yeah. What else can we talk about? Well, controllers. Oh, right. So yeah. And now I don't have a cable, so we need to cut. Let's talk about modern comforts. Can you imagine that most early FPS games didn't use mouse for aiming, and they actually used the arrow keys on your keyboard? You know, the ones that points forward, back, left and right instead of WSAD keys? What were they thinking? But okay, playing a classic 90s platformer or a space shooter using just the arrow keys can feel rough today. And that is why we dive deep into the Dosbox Keymapper, and we go beyond just basic keyboard strokes. We take those clunky 8-way directional arrow inputs and bind them smoothly to your modern analog sticks and triggers, so that when you boot up a 30-year-old game, it magically feels like it was designed for the controller you have in your palms right now. So here you can see that we have binded Xbox One controller for the arrow keys and stuff like that. And this basically allows us to make the game work easily with controller support. Aiming also works. There are two mapping files here. One is for Xbox controller map layout, and the second one is for PlayStation layout. So if you want to switch, because by default it will be Xbox, because, you know, Xbox controller is the default controller for Windows. If you want to swap it, you just launched our configuration tool. You can launch it either from the catalog, from the games folder, or additional executables and game configuration from Galaxy. And here you can just easily set controller, check it to PS, save and exit. While we try to make our default setups as perfect as possible, we know some of you love to tinker. And with Dosbox, the power is entirely in your hands. You want the game to run faster or slower? Tap Ctrl plus F11 or Ctrl plus F12 to adjust the emulated CPU cycles on the fly. Do you want that authentic, glowing phosphor look of the CRT screen? Jump into the config file, head to the render section, and change the scaler to something like TV to X or RGB 3X, and apply those sweet CRT scanlines. And suddenly, you are back in your childhood bedroom, playing on heavy CRT monitor. What if you are not interested in scrolling through 300 lines of code just to find the one block size audio option that is relevant to you? This is why we rolled out a new configuration tool. This tool is always tailored for the specific game, and currently we are adding it to Dosbox titles that enter the GOG preservation program. Here you can easily alter how the game looks, adjust the audio mixer, and swap between Xbox and PlayStation controller mapping. We are currently working on integrating our GOG input wrapper directly into Dosbox. In the near future, our input wrapper will intercept X input and direct input signals from your modern controllers and translate them flawlessly into the emulator on the fly. Every gamepad will map exactly the same from the get-go, giving you native feeling, analog support, and allowing for hot swapping right in the middle of gameplay. So there you have it, a glimpse into how and why we use Dosbox, how we tweak the internals for you. Oh yeah, this is the future, and the future looks bright, and it is coming soon, we hope. Let us know what you think in the comments. Maybe there is some particular feature you would like to see implemented. Anyways, that's all from me now. See ya.